Hey everyone, happy 2024 and welcome to the very first episode for this year of the Security Swarm podcast. Now this very first episode, we're going to have Eric Siron back on the show, and we're going to be doing one of our monthly threat report episodes where we take a look at our security statistics from the last month. We take some of the larger security news stories from the month and we provide our commentary and have a great discussion around them. So we've got that and lots more coming up on today's episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Hello everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Security Swarm podcast, the podcast that brings you the knowledge and insights straight from the security lab here at Hornetsecurity. As always, I'm your host, Andy Syrewicze, and I'm joined by guest co-host Eric Siron today. How's it going, Eric?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, it's your first episode with us for 2024. So happy 2024, I guess I should say.
Yes. Hopefully this year
and in fact,
as well.
Yes, appreciate that. And in fact, this is our first episode for 2024 as well. So you get the privilege of being our first guest host this year. So congratulations, my friend.
All right.
You didn't know you were winning a prize today, right?
I did not. Let me give you my shipping address real quick.
Right. So, well, Eric, we're doing one of our monthly threat report episodes today. And for those that aren't aware, our monthly threat report episodes are focused on a report that we put out monthly here at Hornetsecurity. Now, every month we look at our security metrics, and it allows us to make a lot of educated assumptions and provide some commentary, and kind of gives us a nice view of the security landscape, just based on the security services we offer and the data that we're able to glean from that. Now, this report that we're focusing on today is for January of 2024. The data period is from December 1st, 2023 to January 1st, 2024. So that's the data period that we're talking about here. On top of that, every month in this report, we pick a couple of topics from the security news cycle and we provide some of our own commentary on it. Sometimes it's the big heavy hitting security news item of the week / month. Sometimes we pick some more obscure things that we find really interesting and could have some, interesting impact on the security industry as a whole. So now that I've given you kind of a rundown of what this report entails, in this podcast episode that we do every month based on this report, we provide further commentary, right? And we bring on experts like Eric to provide their insight as well. So, Eric, what do you think? Should we dive into this?
Let's do it.
All right, sounds good. So we'll start with kind of the data portion of this, right? And one of the very first things we look at every month in our monthly threat report is the fact that advanced email threats are down. So when you look at our email scanning services, we categorize threats, right? Advanced threats, rejected emails, spam, things like that. We have categories, right? And so we saw that during this data period, the number of advanced threats is down, and there was a slight increase in the amount of low effort email attacks. Now, when I say low effort, these are malicious emails that were of such a nature that most of them just get rejected outright because of external indicators. That could be because of low domain authority or known bad IP address. We see these things and we're like, oh, we don't even have to finish scanning. We know that this is a piece of, malicious email, and we just reject it outright. So it's very common for us to see around the holidays an increase in the amount of, well, like I said, low effort email-based threats, because threat actors are trying to flood the internet with as many clickable links around the holidays as they can, right? So we've been trending up for a number of months, and I imagine we'll be following the trend of previous years, there's the correct word, previous years, and that we'll start to see things taper off now that the holidays are over. So what do you think, Eric? Anything you want to add to that point?
Well, I'm glad that it is following along the pattern, and a lot of times things like this, pattern breaking is not good. So
That's very true.
when things move as expected, and that's our big commentary, then that's going to be a good month usually.
Exactly, exactly. And this is one of the things that we were happy to see, right? Is it's following the known trend. It's kind of interesting is that um it, it's almost the like it's almost like threat actors know that people are going to be sitting on their couches at home or in their chair thumbing through shipping emails and shopping emails more often. And then it's almost like the end of December rolls around and threat actors go on vacation. Now, they don't all go on vacation, right? But the data kind of paints a picture that they're like, well, okay, the busy period's over. Now we're going to relax a little bit. Now, like I said, that obviously is not the case, but that's the story that I've kind of painted in my mind from this data, I guess. Anyway. So our next data point further supports that claim that we're starting to see the number of threats reduce a little bit. The next data point we always look at is what types of files are being used in emails for the delivery of malicious payloads, right? So those email attacks that utilize an attachment of some sort. And we saw a reduction across the board of all email types, which tells us that there are fewer emails with fewer malicious attachments during this data period. That said, the top 3 offenders continue to be, and they have been for the last probably 4 or 5 months now, HTML files, PDFs, and archive files. Now, some of the commentary that came up this month was the fact that we're not really seeing DocX or XLSX on this list anymore, right? It used to be they were pretty common because threat actors would use malicious macros in Office documents to launch their attacks. And Microsoft made the excellent choice, in my opinion, of disabling macros by default in Office documents. And so with that in mind, we pretty consistently see Excel and Word documents, malicious Excel and Word documents, on the low end of that spectrum now. Typically, they kind of average around 2 to 3% of the overall malicious file types that we see in our data now, whereas HTML, PDFs, and archives have kind of risen to the top now, right? And so when I look at things like HTML, instantly, if I'm a threat actor, I'm thinking, okay, HTML file, it doesn't matter what operating system or platform the user is using, it can read an HTML file, right? Linux can open HTML, Windows, Mac OS can open HTML, mobile devices can open HTML. That's why we see HTML at the top of the list. PDFs have long been used for the delivery of malicious payloads. I think of things like QuakeBot, which is now a defunct botnet that was taken down last year, right? But it was a perfect example of a botnet that loved to use PDFs, malicious PDFs to spread. And archive files have always... there's been malicious archive files around as long as I've been using a computer, right? So they continue to be our top 3 offenders. So what do you think, Eric?
Well, again, I want to go back to how awesome it is that we're not getting hit through our Word and Excel files anymore, and that they haven't apparently found any new ways to break through. So that's a good sign. I'm still a little confused as to how much the archive files keep slipping through. I guess that we not, like you say, that's forever. Have we not learned our lessons yet? But
yeah, they continue to be up there. And in our services, we catch them when they come through, right? But even, when we catch them, we still mark it as hey, this was an attempted attack using a zip file or a RAR file or whatever, right? And so I have to believe that for threat actors, if they weren't having some level of success with that type of file, they wouldn't use it, right?
Exactly.
So it means it's working for them in some way, shape, or form somewhere, not our services, but some way, shape, or form somewhere.
Someone out there is like, oh, look, I have this zip file from this random email address I can't even pronounce. Let's see what's in there.
Nothing bad's going to happen today. So, anyway. Well, the next data points that we cover monthly is which industries are being targeted the most. So we have a metric we have called our Industry Threat Index. And there's a whole math equation around it. If you are interested in how we come up with this threat index, go ahead and take a look at the reports. There's a link below this video or to the side somewhere that I'll send you to the written report. We have all the mathing documented in there. So for those math-minded people, go ahead and check that out. But what this index does is it tells us which industries are being targeted the most. And what's been interesting about the last year or two is, generally speaking, there's been fairly little deviation across most industry verticals. When we look at the metrics from our big annual cybersecurity report, I'll link that in the show notes for those folks that are interested. That report takes a whole year's worth of data, so much larger data set. But what's interesting is that we've seen, it doesn't really matter what industry vertical you're in, you are being targeted. It doesn't matter what vertical you're in anymore. That said, we continuously see the mining industry, the research industry, and the entertainment industry at the top of that list. So like I said, there's little variation between the various industries and various verticals, but these three are consistently on the top end of that list. And I look at this, entertainment is the one that really stands out to me, because when we dig into our data, it's a lot of things around online gambling, placing bets, things like that. There's money involved in that process, right? So we see that as a reason why entertainment is targeted quite a bit. And when I look at research, I think about things like intellectual property. Anytime that a threat actor can gain access to intellectual property, they can do all kinds of things. They can try to ransom it back. They can double extort, like, oh, hey, give me money or I'm going to release this to the public. And then they go do it anyway after the fact, right? There's a lot of trouble that they can get into in terms of the research industry and the mining space. That one's interesting to me. One of these days, I would love to do a deep dive specifically on targeting in the mining space with all that spare time I have. But to me, when I look at mining, I think of precious metals. And I can't imagine there's a ton of players in that space. But there's money in that industry, right? There's a lot of money to be made in the mining industry. So I have to imagine that's why it's at the top of the list. That's my opinion, though. What do you think, Eric?
I would also be interested in how that research goes. What did they... and I'm also wondering part is are they having good success there? Like you were saying before we do this because it works. Are the people in the mining industry especially susceptible to saying, sure, here you go, have the keys
right.
to our Diamond Kingdom or our Cobalt Kingdom, or I'm curious, and also I would like to see some studies done across the entire. It's nice to get these three that pop out, but how is that playing out across? Because like in the healthcare space, I'll tell you, we don't sleep.
Oh yeah, you don't. You guys are targeted a lot
all the time, and then of course in finance is. I assume your finance people by now have been trained. They should, at least the ones that slip through the tools, at least your finance folks should be somewhat less susceptible to. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious at this overall how this is all working out and why these three, as you asked, and then why not the others.
And like to our point earlier with the file extensions, if I'm a threat actor, I'm not going to waste time if it's not working for me, right? I'm going to go to what works. So there has to be some level of success here. And there's money in all three of these industry verticals. I mean, Granted, there's money in other verticals, right, too. There's money in manufacturing. There's money in healthcare. I mean, but when I look at these compared to, I don't know, like the Here in the States, we would call it the nonprofit space, right? Those organizations that operate as nonprofit organizations. There's a lot more money involved in a mining company than there is in a nonprofit organization. So there's a method to the madness there. And yeah, I think it might be a fun episode to just drill into just that data at some point. So that's a good idea for a future episode, I think.
I also like to see, like entertainment, depending on where you're at, some of those have no money, little to no money whatsoever. Some
Right.
steps on the ladder, but might be more vulnerable. And
Right.
like I know a lot of times hospitals get hit, and certain hospitals don't run a profit or run barely a profit. But when you look at the dollars flowing in and the dollars flowing out, it's huge. So when they hit them, it's kind of this whole, well, it's difficult to explain. Like the number for, like when you walk into a hospital and you say, all right, we want to start this new initiative and it's going to cost $100,000. And even though they're running on razor thin margins, that particular building, $100,000 to them is like, okay, we can do that. That's not right because of the sheer volume of money that's passing through. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but
No, you are. You are. No, it makes perfect sense.
it's are these places, do they have that much money or is it just that much money flowing through? Yeah, like you said, where is this? What's going on here in the particulars?
Right.
That,
Yeah, we're gonna
that
do some.
I can get in here and pull some money out and it'll be worth my time.
Right. Yeah, I've already written a note down over here. We're gonna drill into this because it's interesting. Like I said, we continuously see these three near the top, so there's something there for sure. We'll have to drill into it more. So, our next data point before we get to the news commentary section of today's episode, we also look at brand impersonations because when we look at phishing attempts, brand impersonations are very common, right? It adds an air of legitimacy to the email and is often an easy psychological in with the target, right? For example, oh, hey, your Netflix account is, been disabled. Click here for 30 days free, right? Some people are going to be like, whoa, 30 days free Netflix? Why not, So again, that's just an example, but brand impersonations are something that we look at every month, and supporting our data from some of our other data points, we saw a reduction in the amount of brand impersonations throughout this data period. That said, our number one offender remains our number one offender, and that is DHL, shipping company DHL. And this has been a trend for the last 3 months during these holiday months, right? And I imagine as we get into the next monthly threat report and the one after, we're going to see that top place change a bit. So no surprises there. Like you said earlier, Eric, operating as expected is a good thing. It's a good thing in regards to this data. So what do you think? Should we move on to our news commentary? We've got some interesting things to talk about.
Yes, let's do that.
So the first thing I want to bring up is something we've talked about a couple of times on this show. It has been talked about in the news quite a bit, and that is the MOVEit supply chain attack. So many of you in the security space, in the IT space, I'm sure have, unless you've been living under a rock for the last year, have heard the term MOVEit at least once. It is a very commonly used enterprise application that was hit with a number of different vulnerabilities that were exploited heavily over the last year. The various vulnerabilities have been patched now, of course, but of course you've got that perpetual race between threat actors and defensive teams, in terms of the defensive teams are trying to get patches applied before the threat actors can take advantage of them. And a lot of organizations either didn't get the memo or something, because a number of organizations have gotten hit over the last year. So we actually, and I linked this organization in the report. a organization by the name of Con Briefing, spelled K-O-N, Con Briefing. They compiled a collection of data around the MOVEit supply chain attack. And there's a lot of really interesting data points in here. Like there's a list of the victims, a number of impacted individuals, most targeted countries, affected organizations, links to official disclosures like, oh, hey, this company was hit by this MOVEit exploit, right? So they've got a lot of interesting data, and it's been don't quote me on this, but it's been a year or more since that exploit has been around. And so we have a large amount of data now. We have a good idea what the blast radius of this the supply chain attack has been now, and just looking at some of their highlighted data. So the number of known victims so far, keywords here, so far, the number of impacted organizations is 2,611. Impacted individuals, they give a range, 85.1 million to 89.9 million impacted individuals. The top targeted countries, the U.S. by far is the most targeted country. So like I said, we've got roughly 2,600 impacted organizations. Roughly 2,300 of those organizations are U.S. organizations. So when I think about this particular attack, Eric, it's like it's been out there for a while. Threat actors have had alarming amounts of success with it. Countless numbers of individuals' personal data has been breached because of it. And we continue to see organizations fall victim to it, even though a patch has been out. And I mean, there's some argument to be made that, dwell times are decreasing across the security industry. For those people that aren't aware of what dwell time is, that's the amount of time that a 0-day is discovered to the point to where it's, patched. It's that amount of time that threat actors have to take advantage of it before the hole is plugged. Those times are decreasing, but it's been a year. It's been a year, and organizations are still falling victim to this. And I don't know what the solution is. I guess I'm just ranting and raving at this point, but I'm just surprised that we're in this situation. What are your thoughts, Eric?
I'm not surprised. I will tell you that. There's no surprise here at all. I am not I'm not associated with anybody who uses this particular supply chain application, so I don't know anything about it directly. I will tell you that throughout my career, I have noticed that the software vendors that rise to the top of their vertical are usually not very good. They just have something, integrations or inertia or something on their side, but usually their competitors do everything cumulatively. They do everything better, but maybe the market leader does the most, right?
Right.
If that makes sense. So it could be on MOVEit side that they are in some way difficult for their clients to work with. Like, well, if you haven't done this or that, we're not going to give you your patches. If you need to jump through these 37 hoops to get your patches.
I would hope that would not be the case.
You need to know. I mean, because we're all spoiled now by automatic updates. Maybe they don't have that. So, but their customers aren't technologically savvy enough to know there are some applications you have to go out and, does it have an update?
Right.
It could then be, if it's not on the supply side, if it's on the customer side, then again, maybe they don't. Maybe, and I have seen more than a few vendors that you start with a risky situation, then you put a patch on it, and now you have a broken situation. So now you have to choose the risk.
Yes.
Or the,
That's a good point, and maybe that's the case. And I had to look it up because I was blanking on the company name. It's MOVEit by Progress Software, and to your point, I'm in the same boat. I don't use this software myself, but you're absolutely right. There are those, like you said, those vendors and very specific portions of the IT space that kind of rise to the top, right? But they tend to be very difficult to work with. So I'm not going to name and shame here any company, but I remember a certain it was I don't know how I would even categorize it. It was a CRM software, not one of the big ones. It was a piece of CRM software that was very specific to the industry vertical it was used in.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, it sucked. It was so terrible to manage. And to your point, yes, here's a patch, but you have to make sure everybody logs out manually or database entries are held onto. There was no way to sever connections as the admin on the back end. So it was like this huge, arduous process just to go through patching. And maybe it is that situation, right?
Very well be. I if it's not, then I feel bad for maybe accidentally maligning this company. They're just not in very good. The flock that they're flying with, they have a lot of not friendly. Yes, and I have been with. I could start listing names, and I promise if you have somebody in particular verticals, they would. Oh yeah, we know who that is. We know who that is. And so, unfortunately, we can't let them off the hook until we know better.
Right. And I maybe it is easy to patch, and it's just I could also maybe see it being, and maybe I should find somebody who manages this software. That'd be an interesting conversation to have from the admin's perspective. But, there's always those applications in your infrastructure that it serves a very specific purpose, but it accounts for like 0.05% of your overall IT functions in the organization, right? So it's just like that application that sits in the corner. There's like 4 people that use it, and it's easily forgotten about, right?
Yes. I remember a lot of your mail software, your mail and packaging software. 2-3 people tops would use it. The computer's probably not been updated since it was purchased. It's you're if you're big enough to have like a team who can scan the network for security threats and then come and go, you have this Windows 98 computer, we can't do that anymore. But if you're not big enough to do that, and that's over in this corner with 3 inches of dust on it, and one guy named Kevin has been doing it since,
Poor Kevin.
Oh, yeah, poor Kevin, and he just works, and he doesn't know. He doesn't know anything about any of this. I have a thing. I scan and put it on the conveyor, whatever they do, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy. And I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of mid-sized businesses who are absolutely going to fall in that hole if you haven't got some tool out there to scan your network going, there's this thing over here. You might want to double check if that's really you want to do business.
That's that good old technology sprawl, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It just has a way of happening. Very hard for large organizations, especially, to keep their hands wrapped around that. It takes a lot of operational maturity to properly document and keep track of everything that's in your organization, IT-wise. Not to mention the problem that you have with shadow IT, right?
Well, yeah, I'm worried more about the mid-size. You're very large. Like, most of for instance, the bigger healthcare places I work at, they've got a team who sits there and they scan endpoints. What is it?
Right.
What are you? What are you doing? If they can't figure it out, they turn it off and wait for somebody, the screen test, I guess. What I have affectionately called it. Click.
Tried and true.
Oh, the screening is coming from that way, yes.
Yep.
Right? So your security offices will do that, and they'll get out there and, I'm seeing SMB1 traffic, your networking team. I'm seeing SMB1. What's going on here? Let's put an end to that. Your smaller
Ned
companies.
Pyle is putting on his cape somewhere.
Yes. So your small companies are usually not using such a diverse layout that those things can go noticed, right? If it doesn't break, 2 or 3 people know about it. It may not be the exact same 2 or 3 people, but anything around, at least 2 people know about it, right? Because they have to. Because when Jill is off, Janice has to take over, so on and so forth. So there's always this, and there's talk, and there's enough interplay going on in these smaller companies. and they usually don't depend on such the sprawl doesn't usually happen. Usually don't have that much. It's a medium place where they've got the sprawl of the big company, but they don't have the necessary discipline and tools to have somebody every once in a while just go, hey, what's going on out here? So yeah, then you pop up with some really insane things, and then every year or two, maybe they'll bring in like a consultant who will do their best, best effort, but they'll get. I've been in those medium-sized companies, and they're terrifying. It's like one or two people versus the whole thing, and
oh yeah,
no matter how seriously you want to take it, you don't have the budget for the good IT stuff.
I go back to my MSP days,
and
it's an uphill battle for those organizations. Yes. I feel like, and this is probably a whole different episode, but I mean that's. The IT department in those mid-sized businesses is usually one of the last departments to scale.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which is unfortunate, but
yes,
it seems to be the way it goes.
Another thing you could have 100 episodes on is that point, especially that there's somewhere in there that the distance between the free version of a program and the paid version of the program is so astronomical. Like I will say, like one that I notice is like Nagios. Like they're free, does all this stuff, and it's great, but you got to really know your business. But to jump from there into Nagios paid for like a medium business is all of a sudden, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars if you're lucky, right?
Right.
And then they're like, okay, and they're like, well, we pay by the sensor, so which sensors can we turn off? Well, that's.
From a security perspective, that's not a conversation you want to be having.
It's not. And then you go to the big size companies who are like, oh, $2 million on monitoring. That's okay.
Sure. Drop in the bucket for them, right?
Yeah, no big deal. So, yeah, I've been there. I've seen all this stuff, and it's horrible.
Right. Well, we'll continue to report on this particular supply chain attack. It's like I said, it's been patched, but we're continuing to see victims rack up here. So if you're interested in the data, be sure to check out the link in the written report. The next news item we spent a little time commenting on, this will be a quick one, is the fact that the Albanian government and One Albania Telecom, which is like one of the larger telecoms in Albania, as of the time of the writing, were and are under active cyber attack. Now, there's a Iranian hacker group called Homeland Justice that has taken responsibility for it. I know hacker groups love to thump their chest and, say, hey, it was me. So maybe it was them. Allegedly, it was them. They've taken responsibility, right? The whole point of why I wanted to include this in this month's report is there's been seeing a trend over the last couple of years of governments, nation states being directly impacted as of the result of cyber attack. And we've seen a trend. People on the show are probably going to scream at me because I've mentioned this so many times over the last 10, 15 episodes. Storm 0558 is a really good example of this, right? That is the instance where Chinese nation-state threat actors were able to breach Microsoft Cloud services and get a bunch of information out of the U.S. State Department. So my whole point in bringing up this situation, this attack on the Albanian government and One Albania Telecom, is the fact that I think we are reaching a critical tipping point where we're going to start seeing governments around the world say, you know what, enough's enough. Here, have fun with all this regulation, IT industry, right? There's just a personal feeling. I think we're right on the cusp of governments getting really fed up with all this stuff continuing to happen, and we're starting to see it. I know the U.S. Government, the Cybersecurity Review Board. Basically, it started as a review of the Storm 0558 situation, but it kind of morphed into a let's review all of our cloud service usage, basically, and whether or not that continues to make sense from a security perspective. I know that the Australian government has recently, well, not recently anymore, I think it was about a year ago, they've imposed insane, well, maybe they're not insane, not insane, but they've imposed heavy fines on organizations that fail to adhere to certain rules and regulations in terms of IT security. We saw, I think it was you and I that talked about this, Eric, where SolarWinds and their CISO at the time are being sued by the SEC. Right now, fraud was involved in that situation. It's a little bit different. But my point stands is that we're starting to see increased amounts of government intervention and regulation in the IT space as a result of all these attacks.
Yes.
I don't know if there's anything you want to add before we move on to our last news point.
Probably nothing that people haven't already said somewhere. I know, like, if you really want to see the conversation about this, look into a lot of things going on in the EU right now, where
Right.
they are trying very hard to make rules that read really nicely. And the tech community is like, great, but actually complying with your rules is going to be nearly impossible.
Right. There's been a couple cases of that.
Like, it's nice. Like, what if your government comes down and says, okay, your Hornetsecurity software cannot allow a single phishing message through, or we're going to fine you. Well, your best bet then is probably just close up shop.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen anything quite that crazy yet, but I can see exactly what you're talking about. They're getting so frustrated and so sick of all this that if we can't stop the bad guys, we'll have to go after the good guys.
Right.
And then the question mark is who's a good guy, and it's like with your SolarWinds is always, we trusted them, and well, that turned out to be a bad choice. And so we're all out here stuck in the middle of your government saying it needs to be this way, and then, well, your threat actors don't care. They're going to keep doing what they want to do. And then your security software companies are either going to do their best and fail, or not do their best and still fail.
So I'm hoping we'll find kind of a natural equilibrium between the two, right? And I think we can. It's going to take some time, but there has been some crazy government overreach too. I can't name the law, I can't name the statute or whatever it was, but I do know in the UK there was talk of, and don't quote me on this, I'm going by memory, and as listeners will know, my memory is not great, but there was talk of allowing UK law enforcement having essentially a backdoor into services like Signal, WhatsApp, and things like that, right? And to your point, Eric, I don't remember which company it was. Maybe it was Facebook. I don't remember who it was. One of them came back and said, okay, to do it the way you want us to do is basically impossible, right? Like, the technology doesn't exist. We can't do it that way. And to make the technology would be an undue burden on our organization, and we wouldn't exist, basically, right? And I got to the point, I think it was Signal actually threatened to leave the country because that's what the choice came down to them. Either this law is not put into place. Yeah, exactly. Either this law is not put into place or we leave. Yeah. Those were their choices.
And some places like Signal can do that, and then you've got other little software shops who are just going to close.
Right.
Because they can kick back and the government will say, well, so what? All 12 of you? Not our problem. So... Right. Yeah, but this is a long-standing thing. I mean, I did a lot of political science studies in college, and you can go back and find case law going back into the 1700s where politicians like, this is a great idea, and the public is like, that is a great idea, let's do that. And the people actually in charge of making it happen are like, but no.
This isn't going to work because of A, B, C, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Good times. Well, with the time that we've got left, Eric, I want to talk about really quickly 2 new phishing campaigns that have kind of shown up in the cybersecurity news cycle. One of them is targeting Instagram users, and the other one is targeting X users. I want to say Twitter, but it's called X now. I'm going to say Twitter anyway. So they're targeting Twitter users. So I'll start with the Instagram one. And this one is happening via email, right? So traditional phishing. But what's interesting about this campaign is, and I've got a link to a news article that actually has some screenshots, the UIs and the wording used in this phishing campaign is quite good. And the psychological vector of attack here is okay, I'm an Instagram user. I get an email from Instagram at contact-help-channel-copyrights.com. So sounds semi-legitimate, right? And it's semi-legitimate because the message you receive is, hey, your Instagram account is in violation of copyright infringement, right? It's infringing on copyright. So it's got this air of legalese to it, right? And I'm thinking like, okay, if I was a big influencer or I'm running a marketing department and I've invested a lot into Instagram, if I get one of these emails, I'm going to be like, whoa, alarm bells are going off in my brain, right? So that's kind of the psychological aspect. And essentially what the phishing message does is it says, we need to verify you are who you are, and then we can have this copyright discussion. You need to enter one of your two-factor authentication backup codes into this form. Now, I want to make sure that I'm clear here. I'm not talking about the two-factor authentication, the actual 2FA code, the backup code. So I enable 2FA on my Instagram account, and they give me most services give you 6, 8. You store them away in a safe somewhere, and that's the oh crap button in case 2FA for that service ever breaks, right? And so this form is actually walking the victim through obtaining, with screenshots, obtaining one of those backup codes and putting it into this form. At that point, the threat actor has the ability to take over the account. The other phishing attack making its way around is not a traditional phishing attack in the sense of email, but it's being used in a phishing type manner. So when you look at the URL that's associated with a Twitter status, with a post, a tweet, I don't know what X calls them these days. I'm going to say a tweet. You've got HTTPS www.twitter.com/username/status/a string. Right? So I have a randomly generated string that is associated with that post. Now, X is saying it's a feature, I guess, but a lot of folks in the security space have raised this as a red flag. I can take a link to, for example, one of my tweets, and I can post it somewhere, and I can change the username field in the URL, the username section of the URL, to whatever I want it to be. So I can go grab the URL for one of my tweets, and instead of www.twitter.com/Syrewicze, I can replace my username in the URL with Hornetsecurity, and then post a link to that tweet somewhere on the internet. Now that URL appears that it goes to the official Hornetsecurity Twitter page, right? The X account. When you click on it, it will still take you to the profile that the status ID is associated with. So it looks like it's a Hornetsecurity's profile, but it actually will send you to my tweet, the original tweet. And threat actors are using this with large cryptocurrency brands like Binance, I know, is one of them. They also used, I've got a list here, Ethereum Foundation, Chainlink, and basically they're making these URLs look as if they are for legitimate cryptocurrency organization to add an air of legitimacy. Then they land on not the actual Binance profile, for example. It'll be like secure _ Binance or something like that. And then, oh, hey, click here for a free Bitcoin or whatever. There's various different ways that they're getting them to log in further from there. The ultimate goal of these phishing campaigns we're seeing is they are often directing these people to crypto wallet drainers. So they ultimately go through the authentication mechanism, and then ultimately the crypto wallet is drained of all of its resources. So looking at these two together, Eric, these are two newish campaigns targeting two very popular social media applications. And to me, it just speaks of there's money to be made being a threat actor, right? And I mean, they're getting increasingly complex with their efforts. So I've explained the two attacks. I want to let you get a word in here. I know I've been talking for like the last 3 or 4 minutes now, but I'll let you add your 2 cents.
Well, I hope everybody out there's thinking the same thing I am, that this is awful, because you have 2 layers of apparent legitimacy here. First is the platform.
Yep.
Their Twitter, X, Instagram, whatever they want to be called this week. And then whatever entity you wish to put in there, you gave Hornetsecurity, it could be anybody. That's the big trick. It could be anybody. And
Yep.
all you have to do on your end is change enough of your profile that it looks right, which you could probably get by copying the one that is right.
Not that difficult.
No, it's not. And as far as I'm concerned, these platforms are being complicit. At the nicest way I can say it is they're being complicit in this, because that's not okay. They are lending their name to these attackers and allowing them to do this. And I believe that in one of our conversations offline, you'd mentioned that they know about it and that's just how it is. So that's completely just being complicit and saying we don't care what these threat actors are doing on our platform to our customers. So,
right, and that's the case with the X attack for sure. Like if we're looking at the X attack, I'm not even sure I should say attack, because they've admitted this is the way that X handles status URLs. To me, it seems like the onus is on them to, when somebody is navigating into the service using URL, does the URL, the username string of the URL, does it match the username string that's associated with the status that they're browsing to? It seems like a perfectly easy check to program in.
It seems
I have to imagine there's a reason.
Putting in effort to make it not work that way.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they should even have to necessarily check for it. It should be like, as it's going through and it's parsing the URL, it's like, all right, here's the user code and then here's the tweet.
That's very true, because I mean,
like it's just tossing the user code. That doesn't even matter. We're just going to go for the tweet. But it is allowing, and here's the part where I'm saying they're complicit, is it's taking that user code that is valid and then just ignoring it. So in that URL where it says x.com/Microsoft or Eric Siron, and then it goes to something that Microsoft wouldn't say or that I wouldn't say, I'm mad. That I don't want that. That is Twitter or X or whoever they want to be letting other people put words in my mouth, and I'm not okay with that. Even if they're not stealing anything from them, they're still impersonating me, and that's not okay. And they're doing it with blessing. Still not okay.
Right. I would hope that X will take the time to fix this behavior, because, like you said, if I'm the one being impersonated, I'm not happy about that, and I don't know. I kind of scratched my head at that one, because that's not how it should behave. To your point, if the HTTPS protocol was operating as intended, it shouldn't work if somebody changed the username string, in the URL. And for those folks that are interested, I actually put this example I just laid out. It's actually in the report, so you can actually test these URLs yourself. That said, as of the time of this writing, the statuses are still functioning in the way that we've just described. So I'm hoping they'll fix that at some point. But now on the Instagram side, a little bit more difficult, because it's your stereotypical, a little more difficult for Instagram, because it's more of your stereotypical brand impersonation phishing, right? The attackers have gotten what domain was it? I just mentioned it, right? At contact-helpchannelcopyrights.com. So they've gone and purchased that domain, right? And so that's a lot more difficult to guard against. There's ways, but a little less complicit, but Yeah.
I can't expect
They could still be
company to go
they could
buy every possible. And I know some of them try very hard to get all the
they do.
weird
Some
little
do.
domains, and I know they do, and that's a lot to ask. It's very expensive and doesn't take a whole lot. Well, let me just stick a hyphen in here now, and yeah, that's not the same. That's not fair.
And
But also
even
shame
with
on all
this
the companies who were trying to do, well, let's have, you know, this is my company, so let's also have my company dash help and make that a legitimate URL. Stop that. Knock that off. Don't do that.
right.
You just quit.
And in this case, the domain they're using has nothing to do with Instagram. It is more associated with the psychological attack method than it is Instagram itself.
Yes.
So the psychological attack method, again, being you are in violation of copyright. Oh, the domain contact-help channel copyrights.com.
Yes.
So it's
right.
they get creative, that's for sure. And I guess my takeaway here for folks is let your marketing teams know, let those people that handle social media know. Yeah.
Are getting these messages out, but it's got to be done.
It does indeed. So, well, folks, I think we are about out of time today. Eric, I want to say thanks for taking the time to come on and add your 2 cents. It's always good talking to you, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And those of you watching, if you found value in today's show, be sure to check out our social medias. So we've got YouTube accounts. We've got various Twitter. We have Twitter, X. You can find us on LinkedIn. In terms of the podcast, you can find us on all the major podcasting platforms. So you can find us depending on your platform of choice. With that, we'll let you get back to your day. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you again next week with another episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Have a good one.